I've always believed the woods demand respect, and if you give them that, they'll leave you in peace. That belief was shaken last October. It was the second week of the month, right after peak foliage in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. I had taken time off work to decompress and do something that used to calm me: solo hiking and camping. My destination was a lesser-known loop in the Ottawa National Forest, a trail called Ironwood Hollow. It branches off from the more popular North Country Trail and forms a quiet 20-mile loop that few people use after summer ends. My plan was simple: hike in Friday, camp overnight, hike out Saturday afternoon. I told my brother and left a GPS ping at the trailhead just in case. I parked in a dirt lot around noon, the only car in sight. The air smelled of cold leaves and pine. I packed light, just a bivy sack, freeze-dried meals, and my titanium kettle. There was something peaceful about not hearing another voice. No service, no notifications. Just wind and birds. The first few miles were beautiful. The trail was wide enough for comfort, but narrow enough to feel wild. Red and gold leaves carpeted the path, and I passed old-growth maple trees that twisted into the sky like they were praying. The light filtered through in soft gold beams, and for a while, I just walked, grateful. Around mile 6, I passed the old trail sign where Ironwood Hollow looped off. The lettering was cracked and faded, half sunk into the undergrowth. I took a photo and stepped onto the smaller path. This part was narrower, more overgrown. After another mile or two, I reached a shallow creek where I decided to make camp. There was a small clearing about 30 feet off trail, shielded by a wall of fallen logs and underbrush. I set up quickly and gathered sticks for a small fire, more for comfort than cooking. By sunset, I had hot food, warm tea, and nothing but silence around me. It was perfect, until I heard the whistle. It wasn't loud. It came from up the trail, maybe 50 yards off, just a soft descending tune, 4 notes, then silence. At first I thought it might be a bird, but I hadn't heard any birds that evening. I waited, listening. Nothing. I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe someone was passing through. I was near a trail after all. But then it happened again, just as I was crawling into my bivy sack. 4 notes, slow, tuneful, and unmistakably human. This time it came from a different direction, closer, maybe 30 yards north. I sat up, heart thudding. I turned off my headlamp and waited in the dark, ears straining. No leaves crunching, no twigs snapping. Just that whistle, once more, somewhere behind the tree line. I didn't sleep much. I never unrolled my sleeping pad. I just sat against my pack, holding my knife, staring out at the darkness, trying not to blink too loud. At some point, I must have nodded off. I woke around 3:40 a.m., shivering. The fire had died. The woods were quiet. Still, I thought maybe I'd dreamed the whole thing, until I noticed something strange. There were boot prints in the dirt near my fire pit, too big to be mine, too deep. They came from the trail, stopped maybe 10 feet from where I'd set up, and then disappeared. No return prints, just a single line of steps straight toward camp and then gone. I packed at dawn, fast. By 6:01 a.m., I was back on the Ironwood Hollow loop. The mist clung low and my breath hung in the air. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it was, just a hiker checking on me, making sure I was okay. But 3 miles in, I saw something else. A twig bundle, tied with twine, resting dead center on the trail. It was arranged like a charm, spiraled and knotted, with a feather woven into the middle. I stepped around it and kept walking. About 2 miles from the main trail junction, I heard the whistle again. 4 notes. Slow. Drawn out. This time, it echoed, closer than I'd ever heard it. Maybe 20 feet to my right. I didn't run. I didn't speak. I just kept walking. Steady pace, no panic. Not until I saw the second charm. This one hanging from a tree at head height, swinging slightly like it had just been placed. I hit the main trail and didn't stop. My legs burned. My throat was dry. I made it back to the trailhead by noon, and my car was the only one there. I drove straight to a gas station 20 miles out and sat in the lot for a while. Called my brother, told him I'd cut the trip short. Didn't tell him why. The real kicker came 2 weeks later. I was unpacking my gear when I found something I didn't recognize. A Polaroid, stuffed into the lid pocket of my backpack. It showed a man standing on a trail, my trail, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. His face wasn't clear, but he was holding something up, a long curved stick, like a whistle or a recorder. Behind him in the corner of the frame was my bivvy sack, the fire pit, the exact clearing I had used. I never saw or heard him that night, but he was close enough to take a photo. I don't hike alone anymore. I took a solo camping trip last fall in the cold pine region of northern Minnesota, a spot I'd discovered during a work trip the year before. The area isn't on many maps, and it's a good few hours' drive from the nearest gas station. I wasn't looking for tourist traps or lakeside cabins. I wanted real quiet, the kind of silence that lets your thoughts breathe. I'm in my 30s, no family of my own, and after the last few years of being cooped up in a city apartment, with nothing but screens and deadlines, I needed time off the grid. No cell signal, no emails, just trees, wind, water, and time. The Cold Pine Lake area was perfect. I'd gone once before in early summer, but this time I wanted to see the forest. As it shifted into autumn, those flaming reds and oranges lighting up the treetops. The forecast was clear, the gear was packed, and I had 6 days off. I parked about a mile from the trailhead, the road ends before the forest thickens, and hiked in late afternoon, reaching the spot by the lake I'd marked months ago. It wasn't an official campsite, just a flat patch between birch trees with a soft pine bed. The lake was still, a sheet of gray-green glass, and the tree line around it formed a perfect circle like a watercolor painting. I pitched my one-man tent, got a small fire going with dry pine branches, and boiled water for a pouch of camp stew. By nightfall, the sky had turned a deep, inky blue, stars blinking alive one by one. I sat on a flat rock by the lake and listened to nothing. That first night was uneventful. The usual forest sounds, distant owl calls, branches settling, the soft splash of something in the water. I slept deeply. The second night, things shifted. After dinner, I took a short walk down to the lake's edge. The water was mirror still, and the forest around it had grown strangely quiet. I mean, totally still. No crickets, no birds. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. As I turned to go back to the tent, I caught a faint light out of the corner of my eye. Across the lake, on the far side where the trees grow close together, a small orange glow hovered between the trunks. I squinted. A lantern. It was too far to see clearly, but it flickered like a flame. Someone else, maybe. A camper, or maybe a ranger. But Cold Pine isn't a state park. No marked trails. I hadn't seen another car or hiker since I arrived. The light bobbed slightly, moving along the shoreline for a few seconds, then stopped. I stood still, watching. Then it winked out. I waited another minute. Nothing. No sound, no footsteps, no boats. I chalked it up to a trick of the eyes or maybe a hunter passing through. I went back to the tent, read a few pages of an old paperback, by headlamp, and fell asleep. But at some point that night, I woke up. No sound had stirred me. Just the kind of half-waking where your mind drifts toward alertness. The tent was dark. The fire had burned out. My watch said 3:12 a.m. Then I saw it again. Through the mesh of the tent, facing the lake, that faint orange light, closer now, just across the water. It looked like it was sitting still this time, right at the edge of the trees. My heart tapped, a little faster. Still, I told myself it had to be a camper. Maybe night fishing? But something about it felt wrong. No one should be on that side of the lake. The shoreline is steep and overgrown. There's no trail. And the lantern, it didn't move like someone was holding it. It hovered, gently bobbing in one place, swaying ever so slightly. I watched it for a full minute, trying to convince myself to unzip the tent and get a better look, but I didn't. I lay still, eyes fixed, until at some point, again, it just blinked out. I didn't sleep much after that. The next morning, I walked around the lake to that side, curious. There were no signs anyone had been there. No boot prints, no cleared brush, just thick undergrowth and tangled roots. A beaver dam blocked part of the inlet. I went back to camp uneasy. That night, I set my phone on airplane mode but left the camera app open, propped against my backpack aimed toward the lake. If the light returned, I figured I'd catch a glimpse. Sure enough, around 2:45 a.m. I woke again, heart pounding before I even opened my eyes. I looked through the tent. The Ross lantern was back, but this time, it was on my side of the lake. It sat about 15 feet away, just beyond the tree line. It wasn't bright, more like a candle's glow, and just like before, it didn't move like a person held it. It swayed, like it was hanging from a branch. I stayed frozen, and then, soft footsteps, dry leaves, snapped twigs. Not fast, not frantic, just approaching. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just watched as a silhouette stepped into the halo of the light. It was a man, I think. Tall. Thin. He wore what looked like an old-fashioned coat. Long, frayed, like something from another era. A brimmed hat cast his face in shadow. He didn't carry a backpack or gear. Just stood there. He didn't speak. Didn't look around. Just turned slightly, like he was scanning the trees. Then suddenly, the light went out. Darkness dropped like a curtain. I scrambled backward in the tent, fumbling for my headlamp. When I flicked it on and beamed it through the mesh, there was nothing. Just trees. Leaves. Mist curling low to the ground. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. At dawn, I checked the phone. The screen was black. It had shut off, battery drained, even though it was full before I fell asleep. I powered it back on. No footage. Nothing saved. I broke camp. Something about the air felt heavier now, like the forest had changed. I didn't hear birds, not even the wind, just silence. Thick and watchful. I hiked out in under 3 hours, barely pausing to drink. My eyes flicked side to side the whole time, like I expected to see that flicker of orange again in the trees. Back at the car, I sat in the driver's seat with the engine running for 10 minutes, just listening. Nothing followed. No sound. No sign. I drove straight home. A few weeks later, I dug through some old regional folklore sites and obscure forums. Cold Pine isn't widely known, but there are whispers. Old trappers who claim to see lanterns. In the woods, lights that led men off trails. Voices that mimicked your own. No names, no detailed stories, just warnings. They all said the same thing. If you see the lantern, don't follow. I didn't follow. But I still dream about that light sometimes. Not with fear exactly, just the memory of how still the air was, how quiet the forest became, like the trees themselves were watching. And sometimes in those dreams I wake to see that flicker just outside my window, waiting. I used to take long-haul trucking jobs during the off-season, quiet winter months when most drivers stayed closer to home. That's how I ended up in one of the loneliest places I've ever been, the frozen highways of northern Minnesota, near the Canadian border. In January 2023, I took a job moving fuel and supplies to remote ranger stations in the Superior National Forest. Most of the towns up there are more like clusters of cabins than real communities. In the deep winter, the only roads open to some of them are frozen-over logging trails or seasonal ice routes carved across frozen lakes. This was my first time working with what the locals called the North Ice Line. The job paid extremely well, but the rules were strict. You drove solo, always in daylight, and never stopped on the ice unless it was absolutely necessary. Trucks were staggered 15 minutes apart, and dispatch kept radio contact tight. I was given a route. Start from Ely, Minnesota, head northeast toward a ranger outpost near Echo Lake, and make a final delivery to a Firewatch cabin about 15 miles past the end of the mapped road. From there, I'd double back before nightfall. They said it would be a 12-hour round trip max, assuming no delays. First half of the drive was uneventful. Dense forest gave way to open plains of snow, then narrowed again as I moved toward the lakes. I passed signs half buried in snow that marked where the ice road began. Beneath my wheels, solid lake ice creaked faintly beneath the weight of the rig, steel and rubber over frozen water. It was surreal. Trees stripped bare, sky flattened pale like old paper. Just the low hum of the engine and the occasional crunch of packed snow. By early afternoon, I reached Echo Lake. The ranger cabin was just off the shoreline, half hidden behind a grove of frost-covered pines. A man stepped out as I approached, older, with a thick beard and mirrored sunglasses. He didn't wave, just nodded. We didn't talk much. He signed the delivery slip, then handed me a thermos of coffee and said, "You sure you want to keep going?" I told him I had one more stop. He just nodded again, but this time his voice was quieter. "No one's out past mile 82 this week. Storm's been dragging in from the north." I radioed dispatch to let them know I was moving on. They confirmed the route was technically open, but warned visibility could drop quickly after 3 p.m. I checked. My watch, 2:04. I figured I could reach the last cabin and start heading back before dark. The final leg was different. The ice road narrowed, winding like a frozen vein between tree-covered islands and ridges of jagged rock. The truck bumped over pressure cracks and tiny ridges of packed snow. I passed no one. About 10 miles out, I saw something strange. A set of tracks crossed the road, not tire marks, but boot prints. Deep, deliberate, and recent. They came from the woods on the left, walked straight across the ice, and vanished into the trees on the right. That would be odd anywhere, but in that remote corner of Minnesota, in sub-zero temperatures, there were no other cabins nearby, no trails, no snowmobiles, just empty forest. No human should have been out there alone, on foot. I slowed the truck slightly but didn't stop. I reminded myself I was on a schedule. Still, my eyes kept drifting to the tree line ahead. I scanned the brush. Nothing. 10 minutes later, my radio crackled. Static. Then a voice. "Unit 27, this is base. You still en route to Station 2? I pressed the mic. "Affirmative, about 5 miles out." A pause. "Copy. Be advised. We just lost GPS ping from your unit, probably atmospheric." I glanced at my GPS. It had frozen, literally. The screen was a dull gray, flickering every few seconds. I tapped it. Nothing changed. Still, I could see the road well enough. The sun was low, but there was light left. I decided to push through. I should have turned back. 3 miles later, the forest pressed in tighter. The trees were taller here, branches bare and clawed like black veins against the white sky. Then the road dipped slightly, and I saw something that made me brake harder than I should have. A truck, parked about 50 yards ahead, half off the road, facing sideways. Same make as mine. Same company decals. But it was dark, no running lights, no exhaust plume. I radioed base. No response. I called again. Static. Reluctantly, I stepped out, boots crunching hard on the ice. The air was sharp and metallic in my nose. I walked up to the other truck, calling out as I approached. No answer. When I reached the cab, I found the door cracked open slightly. Inside, the driver's seat was empty, The keys were still in the ignition and the radio light blinked. Signal lost. A half-empty thermos sat in the cup holder. The passenger door was open too. No footprints around it, just the same ones I'd seen earlier crossing the ice road. I backed away. That was when I heard the crunch, not behind me, above. I looked up toward the ridge beside the road, maybe 40 feet higher than where I stood. At first I saw nothing. Then movement. A figure. Tall. Lean. Wrong somehow. Wrapped in what looked like an old parka and a face covering that hung low, almost like strips of cloth. It wasn't the ranger. It wasn't any uniform I recognized. And it wasn't cold enough to explain the way this person stood perfectly. Still. Watching. I climbed back into my truck and locked the doors. The GPS flickered once and died. I turned the rig around slowly, tires squealing slightly against the ice. My hands were shaking. I didn't look back. The sun dropped below the trees within 20 minutes. Darkness in that part of the country falls like a curtain, vast and silent. I drove faster than I should have, pushing the truck harder than any manual recommended. I passed the tracks in the snow again. They looked fresher now, more of them. I didn't stop. When I finally reached Echo Lake again, the ranger was gone. No lights, no smoke from the chimney. It was like the place had never been occupied. I didn't radio in until I was nearly back in Ely. By then the static cleared and dispatch said they'd lost my signal for almost 2 hours. I filed a report, but no one followed up. The second truck! No record of it being sent. They told me I was the only driver on that route that day. 2 weeks later, I got a padded envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a photo, a Polaroid. It showed my truck from behind, parked on the ice. The photo was taken from the ridge. You could see me standing beside it looking into the cab of that other truck. Only, I had never seen anyone holding a camera. That was my last winter season. I took indoor jobs after that. Warehouse work, dispatch, somewhere with doors, somewhere warm. But sometimes, when I can't sleep, I'll scroll through my old photos, the ones from the job. Every now and then, I'll find one I don't remember taking. A shot of my truck at dusk, a blurry outline in the woods, a pale streak across the ridge, and I wonder if the ice roads ever really disappear, or if they just shift beneath the surface, waiting for the next driver to follow a trail no one marked.